Welcome to part 2 of my acrylic painting workshop. We're going to cover quite a lot in this lesson, so I'm going to move straight on to some painting. Firstly, I just wanted to show you I've used the tape again, so I've taped up our outer edge of our box over our background. This other tape that runs through the chest, basically the chest is made up of timber panelling with some patinaed metallic strapping that holds it all together with some screws in it. So what I've done is I've actually masked up where that strapping is going to go. The next step is to actually just repeat the process that we did for the background, and then I'm changing my palette a little bit, and the idea is that I'm going to do a tonal variation that runs through the box that will give us some depth to our initial light and dark that we're putting into this box. So to start off, what I've done is I have just got some raw sienna paint, and this is atelier paint, so this is our artist paint. And again, the same way that I initially started our background, I'm just going to add this mid-tone through the centre of the face of the box. So firstly, before I started putting this paint on, I just the same way when I started the background, I've just misted some water and then our Floetrol over this whole box, and again that's designed to give us a little more time to move our colours around. So the idea of putting these colours into this box is I'm trying to recreate almost like a raw timber effect. So the next step will be putting some wood grain through, so the idea is I put some lighter raw timber colours through the background, so then when I do my dark wood grain over the top, you have that contrast, but it makes the wood grain stand out. So this is my raw sienna. Next I'm just going to add, this is just raw sienna with some white paint added to it. So again, very minimal palette. Just keep in mind the idea is that we're basically creating a raw timber look. I'm going to bring this light colour back into our raw sienna. Just going straight over the top of the tape. Okay, and then down into this corner, I've just added, again, a little bit of black to our raw sienna. And this will be our shadow, our darkest aspect of our timber boxes down here in this corner. The same way that in our background we had our shadows over this edge of the canvas. So just moving as quickly as you can, bringing the dark into the mid-tone of the raw sienna, and again bringing that raw sienna back into the dark tone. At the same time, it doesn't matter if you have a little bit of that warmth of the base colour coming through. It's quite a nice tone to have coming through these colours. Just keep in mind, because this will be actually the top of the front face of the box, so there'll be a little bit of light coming through at the top here. Okay, so that's our colour on. In the same way that we did the background, I'm just going to grab a larger brush and we're just going to start doing some blending. As I'm going to have horizontal grain running through, so just have a little play with running your brush horizontally across. Just starting to pick up a few little textures. So just back and forth. already you can start to see we're starting to get some lovely textures as we run through from the light into the dark. Okay, so that's nearly enough for our initial tones for our timber chest at the front face at least. So now, in between this tape and this tape here is going to be the actual top of the box. So that's going to be the top of our still life that any kind of other things you want to add will be sitting on top of. So because it's the top, it's generally going to be a little bit lighter than this front face. So what I'm going to do is just add that mid-tone of the raw sienna, and I'm going to keep that darkest tone out of this top section. So again, just running your brush horizontally, just picking up little subtle lines as you run through. But then with our lightest colour again, just drag the paint through. You start to get this lovely, almost wood grain effect straight away. Okay, so that's basically the base for us to then do our wood grain over the top of. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit this quickly with a hairdryer. If you guys will have more time at home obviously, so if you just wanted to get it to this stage and leave it for a few hours to dry naturally, that's fine. I'm just going to hit it with a hairdryer for the purpose of this workshop, just so I can continue moving through the process. Okay, so there we have just dried off our canvas. So now on to the next step, which is our wood grain. So what we're trying to achieve here is a nice defined wood grain. So what we're going to do is quite a dark colour. It's basically just on this side of black, and that's going to give us our maximum contrast between our base colour and then our wood grain that sits over the top. So our wood grain paint is going to be very wet. I'm just putting a little bit of water onto my palette. So again guys, I'm just going to add some Floetrol to my sponge. And we're going to very quickly apply that to the canvas. Okay then guys, with a big brush, we're just going to staying away from this top section. So as you can imagine, there's some foreshortening happening here. So we'll need to approach this top section of grain in a little bit different. So this is just for the vertical face. We're going to get our dark colour on nice and quick. Plenty of water. Okay, so the next step is, this is nice and wet now. What I've got here, and this is pretty much the key to the wood grain, is I've got this old dishevelled brush. I've had this brush for years. So it's quite stiff. I've trimmed it back quite a bit so the hairs are quite short. Nice flat brush, nice and stiff. And basically you hold the brush up against your tape here and just drag. And every now and then I'm just going to do a little wobble and just repeat the process. Okay guys, so there we have our wood grain on our vertical face. We have some nice light and dark happening through here. So the idea is we let this dry off and then we work back into this with some lights and darks to actually bring out that wood grain. And also we'll just add a couple of little knots here and there. So quite some lovely texture. So next is going to be that small section at the top. So again, this time I'm just going to add some water to my sponge so I don't get any drips running through the wood grain we've already done. I'm just going to make sure that's nice and wet for us and hasn't dried off too much. And again, because this section's a little bit lighter, we're just going to add a little bit of our raw sienna back to our dark colour. Plenty of water. I'm just going to quickly drag that across. And this time with that same brush, we're just going to turn it at the angle. Basically the same angle as our foreshortening. And then we're going to drag through. And again, just a little wobble here and there, just to give that natural wood grain look. Okay guys, so that's our initial wood grain. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to remove the tape. Okay, so what we have is we have our wood grain at our top there. We have our wood grain for our front face, and then I've also just revealed our metallic strapping that will be worked on when we come to the detail stage. Okay guys, so that's your wood grain. Have a little play with it. It can be a little bit tricky. I've been doing it for a long time, so I suggest maybe just grabbing a board or a separate canvas and just having a play with that. Again, play around with your brushes. Have a go at trying to make one of these brushes yourself. You can get a cheap flat brush like this, and play around with trimming it up, and then even maybe just applying a little bit of paint to it, let that dry, just to stiffen up the bristles, and then you could even shape them into a little more of a textured brush. Okay guys, so have some fun with that. I would probably at least have 1 or 2 goes before applying paint to your canvas. So just have a go, like I said, on a separate canvas and have some fun with it. Okay guys, now our wood grain's dry. What we're going to do is we're going to paint into the textures we've created to help bring that wood grain out. So to make our job a little bit easier, what we're going to do is we're going to turn the canvas up vertically. And this will just help us be able to drag some vertical lines through the wood grain we've done. So what I'm going to be using is these small flat brushes. There's a couple of different sizes in there. So again, the palette we're going to be using is again that initial base colour, which was the raw sienna. And just add a little bit of white to it, just to make it a little bit lighter. And then starting over here from our left hand side, we're just going to drag some vertical lines through our wood grain, following the lines that we've created. Again, just turn your brush on the square edge to get a wider stroke. Then hold it side on and you'll get a finer line that runs through. So this paint is quite wet, it's got a little bit of water with it. So we don't want it too thick, we want it wet enough to be able to obviously drag. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to our vertical face. Again, I'm just going to add a little bit more raw sienna because we're going to keep this vertical face a little bit darker than our top surface. So again, we're just following our lines that are already in the canvas. So just varying the width of the brush stroke we're putting through. So again, just turn your Turn your brush side on for a finer line. I'm going to add a few little lighter ones in amongst those raw sienna lines. The idea is just light and dark, light and dark. And again, just vary the width of your brush stroke. Okay, so guys, this stage I would allocate probably around between 15 and 20 hours just on this wood grain. So what I'm going to do is obviously show you this initial start, but have some fun with it, have a play around with it. As you get down into your darker shadows, add a little darker tone to your raw sienna. So as you come down, the lines become a little bit darker. And just play around back and forth, leaving the dark line showing from the previous steps. So for the purpose of this workshop, I'm going to move on to the next step. So I'm going to turn my canvas back horizontally. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mask up our outer edge. So the next stage is going to be working back into the background. So the idea is we're going to take some of this pink out of the background and bring some more light onto our box. So this will be the last stage of the background, so this is a chance to correct any imperfections that you're not happy with in the background, and also bringing light onto the subject of the box and therefore creating that higher contrast. So again, I'm just going to do a quick mist of water. I'm going to use my sponge just to wipe away any potential drips. I'm adding a flow trowel again. So next what we're going to do is just add a light colour, which is our raw sienna, with some white, and we're just going to start adding this. This one we're not being overly solid with the paint, it's more of a wash of paint. The idea is just to knock back some of that pink and that really strong colour that's sort of competing with what's happening in the foreground. We really want the background to sit back. Then we're just going to bring some light through. This is just some white with a little bit of raw sienna added to it. It's a little bit of a lighter version of that first colour we just put on. Just hit and miss, so we've got little bits of the background colour coming through. And then right up against this vertical edge here, that's a nice light happening there. So the idea is when we remove our tape, we've got nice high contrast between the darker box and the lighter background. Okay, and then also we're going to do is just add a little bit of a darker tone, so darker than this colour we've already got going on. And also we're going to do is just add a little bit of that, especially along the top edge of that box there. Just keeping it a little bit up into the top corner here, but we don't want to bring it too far across because we're dark enough already. So I've just had a little bit of dark, lovely stuff happening in here with our oranges and our browns. So the idea now is just to use our blending brush. So I've got our blending brush, and all we're going to do now is just go over what we've done. Just knock that back in. Just taking out those brush strokes. Again, moving quite quickly as we did with our initial background. Again, a nice blend against that edge there. That's going to give us a nice contrast. Just painting the dark up into the light. So a little bit of that orange coming through to give us some nice depth in our background. Again, just try our little crosshatch brush strokes. They help to get a nice even blend around your paint. Just eliminate any focal points from the background just by softening them back. Okay, so that's our background finalised. That's all our light sorted for our background. So as you can see, we've got quite a nice amount of light coming onto our box. So now I'll just take away the tape. And there you have it. So what you've got is you've got the box now coming forward and the background sitting back to where it needs to be. Again, by now you guys should have worked your grain so it's not quite as painterly as this. It's a little more detailed. So now for the final stage, which will be the detail.